Hi, everyone, and welcome to Signature West Podcast. I'm your host, Sam West from Palm Springs, California. Speaking of Palm Springs is a city where it has such a vibrant and robust art scene community. So whether you're an art fan, art collector, artist, we're going to spend the next half an hour dissecting what makes Palm Springs such a vibrant art scene, art community where actually artists are thriving, even during last year. So my first guest is T. Santara. I hope I got that right. And my second guest is Joe Dino. I hope I got that right. Hi,
You
guys.
did.
Okay. Oh, my goodness. All right. So let's start with you, Joe. I've known you when you were in LA, and your last project you're working on was Where the Bear's At. When did you realize you have love for art and a paintbrush?
My mom was a painter, so I think I got it from her. But I've always wanted to do it, and for some reason, I never did. I mean, I took art classes and stuff in high school and college, but yeah, it wasn't until around 2010 I was like, you know what, I want to play on a big canvas. So I got the big canvas and made a painting, and I'm like that turned out better than I thought. And I started taking a couple classes at there's a place in near Silver Lake called Barnesdale Art Park,
I know
and
where it is.
yeah, so I took some plein air painting classes. I really like that because you go out in a few hours, you paint what you see, and it was a fun thing to do on a Saturday.
So you moved to Palm Springs, and then you
Yeah,
started jumping into it.
yeah. So about 3 years ago, moved to Palm Springs, and we ended up shooting the last season of our show out here, where the Bears are, and that was really fun. But I wanted to transition away from acting. I made a career doing commercials and stuff in LA, acting, and that had sort of dried up. It became more non-union, like 80, 90 to 90% non-union commercials now. So I wasn't making a living, and then for my first year out here, I was still driving back doing auditions and stuff. But I thought, I am enjoying painting. If I could do that full time, I would love it. And a friend of mine had a studio, and the space next door became available, and he ended up renting it out to me and two other artists. And it was kind of an easy step because it was only like $100 a month to jump in and have a studio. And then now 3 years later, I have the studio to myself, and I'm actually selling paintings.
And
And
was your first gig the mural that you did on Indian at the restaurant?
yeah, a bit of country. That was, it's interesting. I've been going there for years, and I was eating lunch there, and they had painted over their big mural out front. It was just white. It had been that way for like 6 or 8 months, and I just had a show with me and the other artists in these studios. We had a show at the Brian Markey Gallery in town, and I said, "Hey, I'm in a show in town. I'm an artist. Is anybody painting your mural?" And they go, "We don't have anybody yet. What's your art like?" And he grabbed my phone and he walked it back to the owner in the kitchen. And he came back. He goes, "Yeah, you could do it." I was just like, "What? Okay." And
And and T, you started. I've known you since we got into pickleball season. How did you end up in Palm Springs, and when did you start falling in love with art?
God, I've been sketching and drawing as long as I can remember, but it really took off for me in high school. I was raised in Santa Monica, and at the time I entered the high school there, they had moved to this program where they were allowing students to pick majors in order, and the theory was to prepare them for what college life would be like. And I wound up in an art major, and I just fell in love with it, and I thrived, and had one instructor in particular who also was a professor at Santa Monica College, and he mentored me, and he was very encouraging. I wound up following him to the college there and taking classes, and I thought, meanwhile, I was trying to make a living. So I wound up working for the phone company where my mother had worked and told me that they were hiring. So I was doing that, and I was going to school, and I really came to a point where I figured I cannot do both like this. I got to get serious about one or the other.
Yeah.
So I found a school in San Diego called La Mesa College. It was also a community college, but they had a very well-rounded art program. So I went there to get my degree, and went broke, wound up working as an electrician down there, came back to LA.
And how long
and
ago was this? What year was this?
That was in 76, 77, around that time frame.
Yeah.
And anyway, came back to work for the phone company in LA, and sort of put the tools of my painting trade down and picked up the telephone trade. And so I just dabbled since then. But so I mean, it goes back that far.
So you were pretty much an LA boy as well. I did not know that.
I was a Venice
I
Beach
thought you were
boy.
the North California boy. Okay.
No, my career sort of
Right.
took a turn because Joe mentioned that the commercial industry in LA stopped being union. Well, I got involved with my union at the phone company and I made that my career. So I went to work for them. I became an officer locally, and then I was hired as a political director for my union in the state, moved up to San Francisco where the Public Utilities Commission is. I worked with them and had to go to Sacramento. Then from there, I moved to Washington, D.C. And then I ultimately came back to LA, retired about 5 years ago, and then moved out here full time in Palm Springs.
So Palm Springs, as I said earlier, it's, in my opinion, it's this big, obviously, but it has such a really robust art scene. How do you guys feel about that as far as the challenges? And I mean, there's plenty of artists, they're all great. I met a lot of them just in the last few months. Is the competition an issue? Or does it really not even, there's plenty of food around?
I'll jump in. Competition is a bit of an issue. It's funny because when I was thinking about moving out here, I had a studio in Washington, D.C., but I was coming out here regularly because I was renting out my apartment and whatnot. But I thought if I'm going to get serious about this, and I was in D.C., I became represented by a gallery there, and I thought I'm going to have to do that out here. So I came to town just for the purpose of shopping around my portfolio. And what at that time was probably maybe mid 90s or so, almost every single gallery I went into was an artist operated gallery, and the only stuff they were interested in selling was their own.
Right.
I had a really hard time finding anybody who was willing to show other artists. So I got really discouraged by that. Since then, things have changed a bit, but there's still a lot of folks out there who just, show their own work.
So Joe, when you came here, Palm Springs again is this big, and obviously you knew there's a lot of artists in the scene. Like I say, there's in the real estate world, it's infested with realtors. So you got to be. Was that a few factor, or did you say screw it, I'm gonna do it anyway?
Yeah, I think I got really lucky. I had a couple things going. First off, my good friend Tim Gleason had a studio here, and it's because of him getting the studio next door and having me and my friend David and Jody move in here. I didn't know them at the time, but they're all friends of him, and really got us going. And then he was having a show at the Brian Markey Gallery, and he asked Brian if he could do a group show with all of us. So like that helped.
How many were you?
There's 4 of us.
So it was 4. The show was for 4.
Yeah, and I'd already met Brian a few times because I've been here for bear events, and I've been because of my show Where the Bears Are, I've been able to be part of they had a little art thing called Bear Art or something, so I got to be a part of that. And then each time I would invite Brian. I really loved his studio, so it was kind of fortuitous that his gallery was the same one that Tim was having a show at. So ended up having a show. It went really well, and it made me feel like I could do it out here. Brian gave me really good advice when I was painting. I didn't, I'd come from LA. I'd been doing plein air. The desert's a little too hot to do plein air, most of the year, and your paints dry up really quick if you're outside and stuff. So I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do that. And I asked him, I was doing these little kind of smaller paintings that were a little fussy. And he said, what, people have these huge houses here and they love to be swimming in their pool and look through a window and see a big old piece of art. It's very vibrant.
Interesting.
That's when I started going, I'm going to try something really big. I'm going to use palette knives. I'm just going to do something. And that's sort of where that first style of mine came out with like the bit of country.
So speaking of style, okay, so I have a couple of your pieces, and so is T. It defines who you are. So I'm gonna share them with you and tell us why it defines your work. And can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is one of yours.
So this is my new stuff that I'm working on. Being part of the bear community, I thought, you know what? This is kind of hoity-toity, but you know how what's his name? James Carey Marshall really wants to bring, or is already bringing, the African American perspective to art and
Right.
representation and that. And I really wanted to represent big guys, bears in some art. Like I hadn't necessarily seen that. So that's my objective right now. I'm really working hard to do that. I've been doing mainly desert landscapes, and now my new stuff is I'm trying to do that, and I'm figuring out what my style is, because I don't want to be super realistic. I want to kind of do like as little amount of information, but you still know what you're seeing.
And this one?
Yeah, so that's like the pink one. It's the same one that's right here. Is
right.
I took a online class this last year, and this teacher, Catherine Kehoe, I learned her method, and that was a self-portrait that you had to look in a mirror and put the canvas right next to it, and then measure from your eye to your ear and your ear to your nose and all that, and get the drawing really perfect, and then very angular shapes and a few colors to give the dimension.
And that's oil or water?
Acrylic.
Acrylic on canvas.
Yeah, acrylic on canvas. The pink one's acrylic on board, but
okay.
The blue one's a big acrylic on canvas.
Let's go to T, which is very different than yours.
Very different, but I love your work, Joe.
Oh, thank you. I love yours too.
Thanks. I have a very eclectic style, I guess, but I usually gravitate to geometric abstraction. I have done some representational stuff, but it never satisfies me. So I keep coming back to the same kinds of abstraction. So the one you're pointing at there, Sam, is one that I did in 2017. And it was really, I think I mentioned my background was as a political director, AKA lobbyist. So I've been involved in politics.
No, I did not know that. No.
Yeah. I've been involved in politics for years, representing my union in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. So it's sort of in my blood, and I follow politics very intently. And so a lot of my work has a political tone, and this one does in particular. So this one is called Resistance, and it was all about a response to the whole resistance movement as Donald Trump was ascending and ultimately got elected. And so there's a lot of symbols in here that might be a little hard to read on that one, but I mean, you sort of get a sense of, the background is an orange wall and it's sort of whitewashed. And then there's the circles that are sort of symbolic of Captain America. So there's a lot of different themes in that one.
And your next one is also abstract, but very contemporary.
Very contemporary, although I call it desert modern, and it launched me in a series, which as a matter of fact, you're both invited to the Backstreet Art Walk, which is happening tonight. I've got a new series of paintings along the same theme. So this is geometric abstraction, which is something that's always been very satisfying for me. I did this one just a couple of months ago, sold it to a really nice couple in Denver. So that's where it is now.
Okay, love it.
Thanks.
You both participated in the first pop-up event in the desert.
Desert Open Studios.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how was that? If I'm not mistaken, Joe, you sold a couple of pieces, no?
Yeah, I sold that one actually.
So how is it? How does it happen when you it's a first event, big event, and yet the consumer is very involved and they're buying? I find that very it's not like they're going to lunch. Art is not something that you just go out on a limb and go buy a piece of art, But good for you. So how was it?
Yeah, well, I don't know. It was for you. It was a great experience for me. I probably had over 150 people come through over the weekend, which is amazing.
A lot.
I had just been a studio here. I have the space I'm in is kind of my studio. There's a door and there's a front area. And when I shared, we took all the space, but then my studio mates moved next door. And when the pandemic hit, Brian Markey closed his gallery, so I didn't have representation. A lot of the galleries closed downtown.
I mean, no one really had anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So I turned the front of mine into a gallery space for me, and so this was kind of the first having people to see it because I'd had it for over a year, but no one was going out because of the pandemic. So this was the first kind of like, hey, here I am. I'm part of this, and I thought that whole thing went.
And
off.
was it who bought? And also, didn't you commission something to go to somebody's house somewhere, and out of state, out of city? Somebody.
Oh yeah. Well, one of them I got to show. I'd already, commissioned it. I'd finished it, and I just got it framed, and they let me show it. But it's their house in Rancho Mirage. It was let's see. I gotta. It was a lot bigger than that, but.
That's the one. Yes. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So I mean, it must be flattering somebody to actually commission you to do something like their house.
Yeah.
And you just got into the scene 2 years ago. That's crazy.
You know what? I think I did get a little bit lucky that.
I don't believe in luck. I mean, I don't think luck has anything.
No, I mean the fact
Believe
that I think that as an artist, one of the hardest things is to get seen and get out there and get people to know you.
Yeah. And they love your work. I mean, if you don't do good work, they ain't gonna commission you. I mean, I don't think I wouldn't.
Right.
So
doing our show, we did it for 7 years of Where the Bears Are, and we did a fundraiser every year. And one of the levels was you could have a painting from me. And so I probably did, over 100 paintings through the years.
So you were known in the past of the painting sector a little bit here and there.
A little bit, but
You're
also
not a complete stranger when you came here.
Yeah, but I was, it was weird. I was a little famous, so they wanted a painting. They didn't know if the painting was going to be good. It was almost like, I'll take a John Wayne Gacy painting.
Just give me something. Just give me anything.
Yeah. Yes.
And T?
Well, my experience with the Open Studios was great also. Joe, I don't know if you're a member of the Artist Council here in the Valley, but we had talked about doing that last year, and then the pandemic hit and everything was called off. And then some of the main organizers wanted to move forward with it. And so they had a parting of the ways with the council. But I was all in because I'd been pushing for one of those for quite a while. We had them in DC in an artist group there, and they were great. And the thing about them is that when you advertise them in advance, people get excited. And so the market is very different from people just strolling around looking in a window, right? Because they're thinking, okay, I'm going to go to this art thing, going to go into studios, which you don't normally get to go into, and actually see how the artist works. And it's just a little bit more interesting. But you also start thinking about, okay, if I find something I like, where am I going to put it? So people are in that mindset already.
Right.
So that's one of the advantages of doing that kind of a thing. And that's what happened with us. We did great. We had about the same number of people come through the gallery and the studios. I share my studio space with Tim Larry. He is the main guy that has the gallery space, but we're friends. We work together at a different building. We were across the hall from one another, and we decided to go in on this one.
Oh, good.
So it worked out great.
You guys are doing it right too, but that Backstreet Arts District, you have the first Wednesday or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, it's really smart. We're trying to do something similar here. We're trying to label this area, because right now it's just called the Sunny Dunes area. But we came up with a SOTA Arts District south of the airport. So we're trying to make that happen.
So, but here's my point. What I was saying earlier in the introduction, I'm just even learning this. There's the Sunny Dunes. There's the area where T's talking about. There's another area on Perez.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, and again, we're living in an area this big. So, and yet it's not impacting the community or the scene in a bad way. I just feel. Do you think it's being saturated? Do you think is it too much overkill?
I don't think so. I mean, first of all, you see the different styles just between Joe and I, and people have really wildly different tastes,
right.
and that's the beauty of art. There's always a personal connection when somebody buys a piece of art,
right?
I think to some degree, the more the merrier. I'm not trying to make a living from my art. I am thrilled if I can cover the cost of my art. So it's a little bit different for me. I think if you're a working artist and you're trying to make a living from it, it is a little bit more saturated here than you might like. But the upside, at least for me, and Joe, jump in if you have a different experience, but to be around so many artists and to have an opportunity to see their work and even collaborate sometimes there's so much energy from that. Everything else has sort of become secondary.
In there, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The best thing about this is there's 4 of us here, but there's now actually 5 or 6 of us. The best thing is I'm not creating art in a vacuum. Like, I get stuck, and I really respect these other artists, and they'll come by and they're like, "Hey, did you ever think of this? Did you ever think of that?" And I mean, I feel like my art has grown exponentially because of these other artists that I'm near. And we got a really great relationship with our landlords in this area. They own the whole area. They own
the block.
Yeah, the Williams brothers.
Right.
So they give us a heads up when a new places come available. And now with this last art walk, we used to scramble every time something came up. We're like, does anybody know an artist that that also we would like, that would fit in with us, that would mesh? Because it's not just any artist come in.
So you used to scramble because there was shortage of people that you want to bring in?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So we on this tour, I think 5 people left their card and their name with me, be like, if another space comes available, I'm in. And you guys have a limited amount of space. Yours is all artists and all filled, right? I mean, you got the framer and then all artists, basically, right?
Pretty much. There's one other guy in the back who does furniture repair and restoration, and he's been there since dirt. But yeah, that's the nice thing about it. It is a known quantity. In fact, I'm sure there's even 2 signs that the city put up on Palm Canyon that says Backstreet Art District and points the way. So that's nice. But yeah, I think that is a fantastic idea to sort of brand that area as, it already has an antiques sort of reputation, but to brand it as an art district would be awesome.
Yeah, well, what's weird? I think the antiques is downtown on Sunny Dunes. We're Gene Autry in Sunny Dunes.
Oh, okay. You're in the different section.
So
I didn't know that's on the
airport.
I did not know that.
I feel like they could be Sunny Dunes and we could be south of the airport.
There you go.
Just like you were confused, that I feel like a lot of people are confused with that.
So I was confused on now. I did not know that you just mentioned it. So thank you for clarifying that. So T, you lived here the longest. Who lived here the longest? I think T did, right?
Yeah.
T?
Being in Palm Springs?
Yeah. How long have you been?
Well, I've had a place here for about 30 years, but it's been a weekend place, and we just moved full time about 5 years ago.
So you've been here the longest. So in the last 5 years, where have you seen the evolution take place in the art world?
I think probably most significantly is the artist community has gotten itself much more organized and connected. Part of that's through the Arts Council, but what's happening in the high desert has been amazing too.
Yeah.
Desert X has been really pivotal in getting an arts focus for the Coachella Valley. And I'm, since I got here, I've been trying to get involved with the arts community. And one of the first things I did is I went to the museum to see if they needed volunteers. So I've been a docent at the museum for the last 4 years. And
so the changes, have you seen the changes from the last 5 years to now? Have they, obviously, you've gotten more artists, as far as I can see it.
Well, I think the artists I don't know that there's actually more artists, but I think that the ones who are here have a better opportunity to get themselves seen.
As opposed to like part-time?
As opposed to part-time, or, many of us, and Joe, you might have done this too, where, you first start working in, an extra room in your house.
Yeah.
And it's just not enough. And a lot of us need a space to go to. So that kind of thing has been happening, like Joe did with, trying to find people who are compatible to come into the space, at least around him. I was doing the same thing. I started off at a building on South Palm Canyon by the El Mirasol restaurant there. And the whole top floor was artists. and the energy was great, but it was a terrible location. So a lot of us who were there wound up looking for other places. So it's, that part of it, the organizational part, has really improved, I think.
So the last question for you guys, the famous James Baldwin says, artists are here to disturb the peace. How are you disturbing the peace?
Oh gosh.
I know, right? I was off guard. And I
I'm
love
not
the phrase, and I
disturbing
think
the
it's totally on point. And I think it's actually, if you don't get misunderstood in the phrase, it does stand for something. I just want to know where you guys stand with that as far as an artist.
Well, I feel like art is very personal, and I feel like I'm trying to get more into that as more myself, my community, Bears. I'm really focusing on that. I want to show what what my life is like in my group of friends, and I realize, like, all those artists that painted these beautiful women, and that's all the people they were interested in. That was their life. That was what they, so it's like, why aren't I painting what I think is beautiful and what I am drawn to? And if that's disruptive, or, I love it.
Kill it, run for it.
Yeah.
I the same thing. A lot of, I mentioned earlier, a lot of my work has a political slant to it. So I respond to different things: gun violence, politics in Washington.
So speaking of, does that, when you hear something, does that ignite you? Like something, obviously, politics is like the epitome of like you can turn on anything at any time of the day and it will trigger you. So are you being really triggered, being creative more, and being, have a lot more fuel because there's so much of that going on?
Yes, I mean, that's constant. I mean, but translating that into an artwork or working in a way that's satisfying, that's the trick.
Right.
So sometimes I get stuck, even though I could get very, emotionally engaged with an issue. I may not see the outlet, but that's where I usually just go to the canvas and start throwing paint on it, and something emerges from it. So. All
right, last, where can the audience find you, your work, and look you up? Each one of you. You go first.
I'm at tsantora.com.
There you go.
And I'm at dietleart.com. DIETLART.com.
There it is, right behind you.
There you go. Gentlemen, thank you for doing this. I certainly learned a lot. Keep up the good work. Be creative. Obviously, without being creative, I don't know what else is left to do. I can't even understand the ones that are not creative, but that's the whole thing. The listeners and the audience, if this was of value to you, please subscribe. Please follow. I mean, I know it's a mantra now, but it helps us to make this happen. It helps us get the word out, and we're all being creative the best way we can. So on that note, thank you so much for doing this, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.